Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up or anything. Awesome, great. Thank you. I'm Stephanie Caban. I'm assisting Professor Abby Nemec with today's event. We'll give it another minute or two as I suspect our meeting's ending. We'll see a mass entrance of people jumping in. So we'll give it another minute or two before we officially kick off. But while we're here for today's event, if this is your first time joining or attending one of our senior equine presentations, we have a fabulous lineup ahead of us, and we'll have moments for question and answer. So if you have a question for any of our students during their presentation, please use the chat box and add those questions there. And at the conclusion of their presentation, I will go through and read them out loud, or if you would like to raise your hand and speak to your question out loud, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get them answered in the order that they came in. We'll give it another minute, so I'm gonna continue playing music, but welcome to today's event. Great to see everyone. Hello again, everyone. I promise I'll put the music back up at the end of today's presentation. I'm glad everyone likes the music choice. But good evening, everyone. I just have a couple of housekeeping, and now actually just one brief announcement before we get started today. Hello, I am Stephanie. I'm assisting Professor Abby Nemec with today's event. As you entered today's event, I'm sure you saw the slides with the rotating photos and the titles of today's presentations. We have an amazing lineup of presentations today. And if you've ever attended this senior equine presentation in the past, then you know we have our student presentations. At the end of their respective presentation, there is a moment for question and answers. So we'll love for you all to use the chat box or use the raised hand feature to ask any questions you may have for these students. We do have a few minutes allotted per presentation, so please keep that in mind. But without further ado, I will pass the floor over to Abby.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I am so excited about this. I'm grateful to you all for taking this time out of your busy week to join us for this event tonight. The Equine Dinner has traditionally been the highlight of our academic year in the equine program, and we're excited that we can now bring this traditional event to a broader audience through the magic of Zoom. For a committed and capable few students, this event is every year the highlight of their 4 years in the program, and I'm very excited that this format makes it possible for us to swing the virtual doors wide open and let everybody in. I would like to ask you at this time to be sure that you have muted your microphone, to please turn off your video to preserve the presentation quality for our students. You have been invited here tonight for one important reason. You have provided some sort of genuine support to our program and our students. You may have served on our advisory board or supported us as colleagues, participated in the program, or given personal support to somebody who participated. Without you all, we truly cannot do what we do here. So because of that support in the public broadcasting model, we want you to see what we've done with your investment. The student presentations you're about to see tonight are the culminating activity following 4 years or sometimes more years of hard work and dedication on the part of our graduating seniors. And the first person I'd like to introduce tonight is the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, our biggest fan in the equine program, Dr. Dylan Klein.
Thank you, Abby. And like everybody's saying, I'm excited to be here. This is the Equine Senior Presentations is the highlight for Arts and Sciences at the end of the year. And especially exciting because we have 2 of our 3 students presenting today are for online students. And so for people who don't know, this program was an on-campus only program until January 2018. And so it's been exciting to watch this grow. And I have to say, Abby's been fantastic. I mean, the entire equine field, she's the one who's been innovative in putting this online. And so I want to say congrats to our 3 students, Brooke, Dominello, Megan Prince, and Lindsey Blanchette, and for presenting today. And shout out to our program chair, Abby again, and our associate faculty, Nancy Worthington and Danielle Amat, for making today possible.
Alrighty, I guess that means it's me now.
Yep.
So, let me see. There are a few students, first of all, that before we start our presentations, there are a few students that I would like to call attention to tonight. At this event, for many years, it has become a tradition for us to confer an award on some of our graduating seniors from the graduating classes of this academic year. So that means everyone who has graduated since the spring term last year. This award is known as Departmental Honors. Departmental Honors in Equine Studies is awarded annually to graduating seniors with a declared major in equine. The recipient of this honor will be a student who best exemplifies the personal and professional ideals of the post-university equine program, and someone who shows outstanding accomplishment in meeting the stated outcomes of the program. In other words, this is someone who is not just a great student, but is someone that if we had the opportunity, we would like to hire to work for us. So this year, it has been easy to decide on recipients for this award because we have a great handful of students who are both academically strong, as many of our equine students are. And if you've had them in class, you know exactly what I mean, but you can also count on them to always have their work done when it is due, and they will also help to ensure that the content and the activity that happens in your course meets their expectations. First, the first student recipient, a December 2020 graduate of the equine program with double majors in equine studies and human resource management, finishing with a cumulative GPA of 3.93 at post on top of a year's worth of credits from Dutchess Community College. I am pleased to confer departmental honors for Kelsey Tuan. Next, after her May graduation, heading off to her next grand adventure, the School of Veterinary Medicine at Mississippi State University, this graduating student and a presenter for tonight takes with her from post a bachelor, get this, a Bachelor of Science in Equine Studies, another one in biology, a chemistry minor, and a certificate in veterinary assisting. She's graduating with honors distinction with a 3.89 GPA. She has been an anchor of the Equine Club on campus and for 2 years was my assistant in the equine office. She was previously captain of the IDA dressage team at Post and has been selected to present at 2 regional honors conferences. Thank you for everything you've done. To the next recipient of this award, Brooke Dominello. For the first time this year, I am able to give this award now to online students as well. And the first one of these is going to be a June graduate. So that counts as this academic year. So that's part of how this works. Completing our program with a couple of years of transfer credits behind her from Santa Fe Community College, but with a 3.94 GPA at Post, a committed and capable professional equestrian in her own right, and another one of our presenters this afternoon, I am pleased to recognize Lindsey Blanchette. And finally, a student who I am pleased to recognize as a business professional seeking to add an equine degree to her resume and having chosen Post for that education, another capable student who has entered here with a couple of years of transfer credits from Colorado State University and the University of Phoenix, but having earned a solid 4.0 GPA in her time here. Our final departmental honors recipient is Kimberly Maturo-Hilt. So that is my recognition for the for departmental honors. Next, moving on to the next stage of our event tonight is our introduction of the presenters for tonight. Handling that for me is going to be the 2 faculty members who have taught the Equine Senior Seminar course at Post in this past year. The campus section taught in the spring term, spring semester, has been taught by Nancy Worthington, a strong associate faculty member who has been with me at Post since almost as long as I've been here, but not quite. I'm still about 9 months ahead of Nancy. This is Nancy Worthington. She's a professional massage therapist for people as well as for horses, and has taught massage at Post as well as a bunch of our anatomy courses, and also in the last 2 years has taken over teaching senior seminar. So the second instructor having taught the online students this year, Danielle Ammett, has been with us for about 1.5 years. She is in her day job the director of driving for the United States Equestrian Federation, and has been a real anchor in helping me. Both Nancy and Danielle have been anchors in helping me to develop courses and build out the content of our program that has brought these students all the way to the point where you are going to see them tonight. So the first introduction, I guess, will be undertaken by Nancy, please.
Yes, I am unmuted. Thanks, Steph. I have the pleasure and delight, and I won't cry, to present Brooke Dominello, who has come so far in her 4 years at Post. Believe me, very far. And I'm really proud of her. Brooke is someone who sees a problem that needs to be fulfilled, a job that needs to be set up. She will do something about it. It's really too bad that we're not on campus to see some of the things that she managed to maintain, clubs, etc. Anyway, she's on her way to Mississippi State University. I got it right, Brooke. In a couple, well, gosh, really, about 3 weeks. So she's gonna just kind of dive off the Post board, diving board, and go to Mississippi, where we have another former student, Michaela Wall. And Brooke's project was to create a survival guide for students applying to vet school, but she also learned in doing her literature review for the project, she learned some extraordinary things that I think are important for all of us to be aware of and pay attention to. So with that in mind, many congratulations. Am I good to start? Thank you. Okay. Oh, I'm not sure why it's not going. This isn't good.
Try using the arrow keys, Brooke.
There we go. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Can everyone see this?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brooke Dominello. I am a senior at Post. I will be graduating with a degree in biology, equine studies, and a minor in chemistry. After graduation, I will be a first-year student at Mississippi State University College of Veterinary Medicine. For my senior project, I explored considerations for the pre-veterinary student. So to start off, is vet school right for me? As a freshman, I found myself going back and forth on if I really did want to apply to vet school. It seemed like almost everyone in my class wanted to go to vet school, and I wasn't sure if I was cut out for it. It wasn't until the end of my sophomore year that I decided that I did want to go to vet school, and I started pursuing this journey. So to break it down for pre-veterinary students, there's a few things they have to take into consideration. First is time. You need to find balance between work, life, school, the application. There's a lot to juggle. During my time in undergrad, I had 2 internships, 6 jobs. I'm an honors student, and I'm also a full-time student. I'm a shelter volunteer, and I had my own horse, so I was juggling quite a few things around. The next thing students need to understand is academics. Now, GPA isn't everything. Schools require different prerequisites, and I had a little bit of trouble trying to grasp that when I first started to apply. And then the last thing is that there are exams such as the GRE or CASPER, which is required for certain schools. And lastly, it's passion. So you need passion. Vet med is more than animals. We promote One Health. Students need to understand is vet med is not for everyone. There are other professions that work with animals, so students should not feel pressure to pursue a career in vet med if they're not entirely dedicated to the industry. Vet med requires dedication to continuous education, animals, and people. Now, just as a quick overview so you can understand how competitive veterinary school is, displayed on the screen is the 30 veterinary schools in the US compared to the 154 medical programs in the US. So for my literature review, I decided to discuss issues surrounding diversity and inclusion, as well as the unintended consequences of cultural matching and zoocentrism. So on the screen is a graph from the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges, otherwise known as AAVMA. This graph depicts applicants by race. So as you can see, it goes from 2016 to 2021. The red represents people who are white, blue is Hispanic, the peachy color is Asian, orange is two or more races, gray is Black or African American, green is those who did not report, and yellow is Indigenous people. As you can see consistently, I'm sorry, I touched that, consistently throughout the years, white applicants have dominated the cycle. Something that I learned during my literature review is recently Purdue University conducted a student survey on applicants. They surveyed Caucasian and underrepresented minorities to decide why the students wanted to apply to veterinary school. What they found is white students were more likely to respond by saying they applied to veterinary school due to veterinary experiences, while underrepresented minorities would say they applied to veterinary school due to personal animal ownership experiences. Purdue concluded that this could be due to different opportunities available to students due to economic class and geography. So ethnic minorities make up less than 10% of vet med. 2% of veterinarians are Black, 6.1% of veterinarians are Asian, 1.6% of veterinarians are Hispanic or Latino. So this brings us into the topic of cultural matching. So what exactly is cultural matching? Well, cultural matching is when a consumer seeks out a provider that shares a same cultural background to them. A recent study that I depicted in my literature review surveyed 36 people, 27 of whom were veterinarians, 9 who were veterinary students. 23 of the participants were white, 3 were Black, 5 were Asian, 4 were multiracial, and 1 is Hispanic. What I found from this survey is the feedback from the participants produced several findings. For example, cultural matching scenarios were discussed where white farmers preferred to be seen by white male veterinarians, whereas white suburban pet owners prefer to be seen by white female veterinarians. What I found is that it's likely that the majority of the vet med client base is overwhelmingly white due to cultural and financial factors. Vet med originated in the 19th century to aid farmers, a historically white profession. A second contributing factor that I found is socioeconomic class. Most pets owners fall into the middle to upper class, since in America, animal ownership is not dependent on survival. What I did find interesting is one participant in the study stated that racial minorities are less likely to own pets, not only due to financial aspects, but also due to cultural disinterest. The second part of my literature review was comprised of sexism in STEM. So women make up 28% of the workforce in STEM fields. Vet med is one of the few professions where women outnumber men, but still face discrimination. Women are more likely to work part-time and they're less likely to be promoted. This is due to zoocentric expectations. And for those of you who don't know what zoocentric means, in essence, it is when you're expected to put your work before your life. So you'll be staying after with animals, long hours, always putting the animals first rather than yourself and your family. Vet med is one of the few professions where people expect you to be there every day, 12 hours a day, and to never say no. And as someone who has worked in vet med for the last 2 years, it is very real. Women are often expected to choose between having a career and a family. In my literature review, I did include a study that was composed of 75 veterinarians, both were male and female, and they ranged in ages 25 to 63. The survey found that it's a common belief that women do not seek promotions and only want to work part-time, which is untrue. This brings us back to familial aspects. Women they're assumed to take on the roles of caregivers in raising children. and it's not assumed to be an equal 50-50 between male and female partners, which is why there's assumptions that women want to work part-time so they can have more time with their family while men continue to be promoted in the field. Now, there's also an issue with client biases. I'll speak on my own experience a little bit later, but what I found is I did include a personal experience from one of the women in the survey. She is a female large animal veterinarian. She stated that she went out on a case to serve a farmer client to conduct a service for an animal. And it was found that the client did not like her services, requested the male veterinarian who provided the same services, and he was thrilled. So it comes back down to that it's evident sexism is present in vet med, and we need to stand together to continue to fight for equity and equality. So this brings us down to survival guide. So my survival guide was based off of a need. I actually decided that I wanted to do this project in my junior year. I was really set on doing this for my senior seminar project. Post-university does not have a pre-veterinary program like some other schools such as UConn, so I found myself struggling to apply to veterinary school without a pre-vet advisor. Applying to veterinary school is not easy. It is not a simple application that you submit and send off. It's comprised of experience hours, volunteer hours, extracurriculars, different sorts of exams, meeting prerequisite coursework, and the list goes on. When I first started this journey, I had no idea what I was doing. I was reaching out to students in other programs at other schools. I was reaching out to alumni. I reached out to Abby and she helped me the best she could, but I felt that there was no one resource that I could go to help me fully understand what I had to do to apply to veterinary school. So to help save other students from my dilemma, I decided to create an easy, comprehensive how-to guide for applying to veterinary school. Now, I did make a disclosure in there that it's based off my personal experiences. This guide is for post-university students, and I will be distributing it to the equine and biology departments. It can be modified to be used by other universities in the state. I did link in certain resources such as internship opportunities that are to Connecticut only. This is just a quick overview of what my survival guide was. The first page, top left, is my cover page, and then my introduction, followed by my volunteer experience and veterinary animal and extracurricular experience. There are several other pages that are comprised in this document. The purpose of it was to not be an overload of information, but a general glimpse of everything that students must do. This was at the end of my survival guide. This is the application checklist, just to give everyone a sort of a hint on what's involved when applying to veterinary school. It took me over a year. My application started back in January of 2020, and I've done my interviews all up until February of 2021. And I've recently accepted my seat at Mississippi State University. So I'll be starting that in June. Now, to tie it back into my own experience, I kind of want to talk about the lit review here and the survival guide. So speaking on my own experience, I personally have not experienced any sorts of discrimination at post-university. I find post-university is very accepting of all people, and I'm extremely happy about my time here, and I'm going to miss post. I miss going to campus. I miss seeing everyone's faces. It's just been a great experience. Something else I wanted to mention is I did attend the 2021 Regional Honors Conference, and I did that presentation not too long ago, just on April 10th. That presentation was Finding a Voice for Women, Speaking Truth to Sexism in STEM Careers. And that presentation heavily influenced my literature review. I was originally going to present this in Albany for 2020, but that had to be pushed to this year. To tie it down to interviews, I found that schools are taking notice that there is a problem in regards to inclusion and diversity. A lot of the questions in my interviews put a lot of weight on diversity and inclusion. I think it's very good what students and schools are doing. And then finally, to tie into my veterinary experience. So from my personal experience, I have faced certain types of discrimination. I won't touch a lot on it, but I have had certain comments made about me versus my male counterpart who is the same age, just housewife comments that were inappropriate, and comments about me being unable to restrain animals due to being female. However, one day I hope to see that we'll see some sort of acceptance on all fronts. We just need to stay positive. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Brooke. We have a question in the chat box. And if I could just have everyone, if you have a question right now, feel free to throw it in the chat. We don't have too much time, but we do have one question in the chat box. And Brooke, after your presentation, I hope you go into the chat box. There's a lot of great positive feedback I want you to see. So our first question is, for yourself, do you envision a career in vet practice or another field of medicine, such as research or government?
I have considered research. I know I don't want to work in a government aspect, although some recent life experiences have made me want to work in practice. I am extremely interested in pursuing a career in zoo med and exotic animal medicine. Some of you know, last year in 2020, I completed an internship at the Connecticut Beardsley Zoo, and it's just been absolutely empowering. I love going there. I loved working with the animals. Anteaters are the best. But as of right now, I am looking to stay into practice. I do like certain types of cases. I work currently at a general small animal practice, and I also work at an overnight ER clinic. So I've experienced a few different types of animals. I've worked at a large animal practice as well. And as of now, I am leading for exotics and zoo med.
Wonderful. I don't see any hands raised, so we'll go on to the next question in the chat box. The next question is, do you plan on getting, excuse me, do you plan on getting your literature review published or perhaps fleshing it out to be a full research study?
No, I do not, but I did share it with Abby and Nancy, and they can disperse it to other students who are interested.
Wonderful. The next question I see here is, what was it about the program at Mississippi State that caused you to select their program?
So I had two top choices. It was Mississippi State and Missouri. The reason why Mississippi State was one of my top choices is Mississippi and Missouri are the only schools in the US that have a 2+2 program. For those of you who don't know, vet med, in vet school, you have to complete another 4 years. Typically, it's 3 years of didactic work and then 1 year of clinicals. Mizzou and Mississippi offer a 2-and-2 program, which is 2 years of didactics and 2 years of clinical, which is why I actually start vet school in June. I don't get a real summer break. After the completion of my first year, I will end in May, but then I'll resume again in July to make up for that extra time that would be missed.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions for Brooke? Going once. All right, if there's nothing, I'll go back to Abby. Is that okay?
Sure, happy to pass this on. Thank you, Brooke. Fantastic presentation, as I knew it would be. The next person who is going to be presenting is Danielle Ammett, who will introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle, and I'm honored to be here this evening. I'm honored to be part of Post University's online program. I think what's really amazing about the online program at Post is that, as you'll see tonight with our next two presenters, we have students who are from all over the US and bring a very unique type of diversity to our program. So I believe Megan is our next presenter. Is that correct, everyone? Yeah. Megan Print is going to present for us. Comes from New Mexico, and she has been an animal caretaker for the Carson National Forest Services, where she takes care of some of the wild horse herds out west. This is kind of an area where many of us in the equine industry might not even be aware that it exists. And so I have had the pleasure of having Megan Print in a few of my courses. And honestly, I've learned more about these topics than anything else. She's been awesome in sharing her experiences and her knowledge on the American Mustang. And she chose some really interesting topics for her literature review originally, and then shifted it a little bit for the senior seminar course. Actually, I'll let her tell you all about it. It's pretty unique and it's pretty special. So Megan, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thanks. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of your day and listening to my presentation. I'm Megan Print, and yeah, I work for the Carson National Forest in New Mexico. I've been working here for about 3 years, and decided I should go back to school and complete my equine degree. So I looked all over, and Post University was one of the only places I could get an online degree, and because I didn't want to leave my state. So it was really convenient, and it's been a lot of fun, and I learned so much more than I expected to. So I would definitely recommend Post to anybody. And yeah, for my senior project, I originally wanted to talk about fertility control, but I felt like I just beat that one into the dirt. So I decided to go for genetic viability of the wild horses, because it's something that comes up from time to time, and I thought I'll just see what I could learn, so I'm prepared to talk to people about it. So I thought I started my slide, but
Yeah, you can click on the slideshow at the very, very top.
oh,
And then from beginning, yep.
okay. Okay. So the topic of genetic viability in wild horses has been in the background of discussions involving wild horse management for decades. In the United States, the wild horses are managed by the Bureau of Land Management or the Forest Service. And during the 1950s and 60s, feral horses in the West were captured any way possible and used for ranch stock or processed for their meat. Inhumane treatment of these horses prompted a woman nicknamed Wild Horse Annie to lead a campaign to protect America's wild horses. It took years of fighting, but in 1971, the Free Roaming Wild Horse and Burro Act was unanimously passed by Congress. And it states, Congress finds and declares that free roaming horses and burros are living symbols of the historic and pioneer spirit of the West, that they contribute to the diversity of life forms within the nation and enrich the lives of the American people, and that these horses or burros are fast disappearing from the American scene. It is the policy of Congress that wild free roaming horses and burros shall be protected from capture. Oh, something kind of went funny here. Branding, harassment, or death. And to accomplish this, they are to be considered in the area where presently found as an integral part of the natural system of the public lands. The areas where presently found became herd management areas, which are shown here in blue. Most appropriate management levels of the horses were set in the 1980s based off of the agency's multiple use mandate, including consideration for wildlife, livestock, wilderness, and recreation. BLM is also directed to manage for a thriving natural ecological balance, to prevent deterioration of the range, and to use minimal management for free-ranging horses and burros. The vague language of the act combined with understaffed offices left HMAs to double in numbers every 4 years. This has gone on for decades in some areas. This picture shows the Modoc National Forest in California, where horses graze year-round on the left. I spoke to a public relations representative who explained both sides provide for cattle grazing 4 to 5 months a year. The protected area is allowed to recover every year, while the left side is grazed year-round by wild horses. Notice how the stream runs through the protected riparian area, providing diverse habitat and high-quality water, while the unprotected portion of the spring has become shallow and exposed from the trampling of thousands of hooves and no opportunity to recover. Many times it takes the government getting sued to motivate and bring the horse numbers down to the correct AML. This picture shows the current method of gathering the Carson National Forest wild horses. It's a bait capture technique using satellites to inform the user that horses are in the trap. The user then remotely sends a signal to shut the gate on the trap. And it has proven to be humane and safe for all parties. Once a herd gets to AML, great, but how low is too low? In some herds, management actions have included removals that have had unknown effects on the levels and distribution of genetic diversity. This is a list of some of the territories on our national forests with the AML range versus actual numbers on the range. As you can see, the appropriate management level on some of these territories is very small, some of them in the 20s. That means only about 8 horses in the herd are breeding. And I found that a minimum population size of 50 effective breeding animals is currently recommended to maintain an acceptable level of genetic diversity within reproducing wild horse and burro populations. So this sounds like a lose-lose situation. Many advocates chime in at this point and say things like the Forest Service is trying to zero out all the territories. And after digging into the specifics, I can see why they think that. After all, there are 19 Forest Service territories with 0 horses on them. And legally, the government cannot reintroduce horses on those lands. I just flew in a helicopter survey over the Caja territory on the Santa Fe National Forest, and we only saw 5 horses. The last documentation in 2014 showed 72 horses. So if a herd gets too small and starts inbreeding, the stallions will have a low sperm count, and every generation will provide less and less offspring, and they will eventually die out. Something like this happened to Przewalski's horse in the 1960s. It had been said that no one could tame these horses, and the only way to get one was to kill the stallion and capture the foals. Due to overgrazing and rough winters, the last wild horse was seen in 1969. Lucky for the species, some foals were captured in the 30s and taken to Germany. The horse didn't do very well in captivity though, and after World War II, the population dropped to 31. And by the 1950s, the breeding population was 12. Conservation groups began organizing to save the subspecies, and by 1965, there were 134 living in 32 zoos and private parks. In Canada, the Forest Service had a wild horse bounty from 1924 until 1988, and piles of bones are still in place where they were killed. So that's how they took care of their problem. The pink area on the map is a small wild horse preserve that dates back to the 1700s. Originally introduced by the settlers moving north along the trade routes, the horses were tested recently for Spanish bloodlines. And the semi-isolated Brittany subpopulation is likely the most remote herd left in mainland Canada and has survived for several centuries alongside major predators. In 2002, to protect and recover the horses, the Zinai, which was like an indigenous tribe of people, established a large wild horse preserve in an area that includes the Brittany Triangle. They won recognition through the British Columbia Supreme Court of their Aboriginal right to capture the wild horses for domestic and work purposes. So they live out there most of the year, and when they need one, they go catch it, they use it. When they're done, they put it back, and it seems to work, and people can visit and look at the horses when they want to. So they tested them for Spanish bloodlines, and the herd came back that they had enough diversity to survive, but many shared similar bloodlines, meaning they probably only descended from a few mares. This is how we test for genetics. It can be by hair or blood. This is a step-by-step process put out by the BLM, and they suggest a minimum of 25 horses when you sample. And if they're being released back to their territory after capture, you should sample those horses that they're releasing. For the Brittany Triangle horses, the researchers had to collect hair samples from the trees in the ground, which must have been much harder than how we do it when they're in a chute and subdued. New Mexico is known for Spanish bloodlines. Northern New Mexico was heavily settled by Spaniards and has not changed a whole lot in the last couple of 100 years. This picture is of the Jarita Mesa horses on the Carson. I think they would be pretty interesting to test because their elevation is about 8,000 to 10,000 feet, and they don't get a lot of influence of other breeds. It's a very remote section. And I'm on the other side of the Carson near the Four Corners area, and it's called the Jicarilla Wild Horse Territory. It's bordered by BLM, an Apache reservation, and a Southern Ute reservation. The herd is very accessible by road because we have oil and gas on the district. So we get horses turned out, domestic horses, every year. So there's a tiny bit of new bloodlines getting in there. The fencing between the reservation and the forest is in disrepair, so the horses cross into the reservations and back. When they've been tested, the bloodlines are less Spanish than the majority of people think. The horses in this picture are descendants of introduced horses from a Wyoming herd that they released in the 80s in an attempt to improve adoptions. And the print is small on here and kind of hard to read, but one of our collaborative members tested 7 different horses from the Carson to see if there was diversity in the bloodlines or how Spanish they were. And they're pretty diverse, but she kind of went down the line to see where in Spain they were from. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And 102 herds were studied by the National Research Council in 2013. The tests measured percentages with wild horse genetics coming back as similar to domestic breeds as far as diversity. I assume this is because from the 1500s until around 1900, different breeds were left to roam the West. Every time a new breed was turned loose, new genetics entered the herd. I spent time in the Devil's Garden area of Northern California and learned it was common practice for the cattle ranchers to turn mares out to be bred by the wild stallions and then round them up in the spring. This allowed them to not have to feed them all winter and produced good ranch stock for the future. The herd is known for gentling, easy, and being part draft horse. And this is a picture of one of them. And management just started testing those horses. Some would say, well, then we should just leave them alone since the herds are diverse enough. Yes, today is okay, but what happens when we do get to AML, which is for many areas below the 150 horse minimum population size for genetic diversity? Experts say a 1% degeneration will occur per generation if this happens. In small populations that are isolated, inbreeding is inevitable and occurs within a few generations. So what options does the government have from preventing this from happening? The first common suggestion is that they let the public in on all the information. Transparency is crucial to ease the frustration between advocates and government. Use of an adaptive management plan is another idea. Not every idea is going to work for every herd of horses. Forming collaboratives where the public feels their voice is heard is important. And more important is the facilitator for that group. It will be the glue that holds the group together. I know of 2 other forests that their collaborative groups dissolved, and we're the only one so far that I know of that is successful. A repeated introduction strategy could be implemented if you were down to AML and you only had 8 breeding horses or so. This would allow gains to diversity to outpace genetic drift associated with small populations. There's a bit of controversy here because the Forest Service manual states selective removal of excess animals or relocation of superior animals from other territories to improve the gene pool is prohibited. The intent of the Wild Horses and Burros Protection Act is to manage these animals as part of the natural ecosystem. So this was brought to the attention of the Office of General Counsel in Washington, D.C., where Steve Hirsch, an attorney advisor in the Natural Resources Division, suggested as long as the Forest Service is not manipulating genetics in order to produce certain desirable traits and is only doing so to maintain genetic diversity, then it is not against the law. Now, one problem with bringing horses in from another territory is they won't know where the water is. And this happened in Nevada when the BLM captured 30 or so horses, drove them 20 miles to another district and dropped them off. They walked the fence line trying to get home and died because they couldn't get to water. On my district, this gray stud was captured with his band, and they're like an iconic group that people like to photograph. So a lot of people cried about it and they put him back out, only they put him alone. So he roamed around alone for quite some time until a couple more horses, old horses, were released. And I just wonder if, you know, being alone, is that better than getting adopted into a private home or a sanctuary? Another idea is using a mare from long-term holding or a sanctuary with the idea of bringing genetics back into the herd while keeping the lineage of history. On Assateague Island, after they got to AML, they let the mares reproduce 3 times after becoming a 2-year-old. It's now down to 1 foal per mare because the mares are living an average of 10 years longer since they're healthier and not having foals their whole life. And they use PZP, fertility control, so they don't capture any. The NRC has suggested once every 5 years, a herd is tested for diversity, possibly at the time of a gather. If genetic management tools need to happen, the tests will show it. Digging into the resources and learning about genetic viability taught me that we need to research everything available before we make an assumption about the subject. Emotional and heated discussions can be quelled just by knowing the facts. And communication and an open mind are key to solving what some would call a wild horse crisis. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Our first question for you is, what are some of the signs of inbreeding?
So I looked into that, and it came up with, as far as wild horses, they didn't have very many, which I was kind of surprised about. On our district, so there's 10 tests that they do for inbreeding, and I haven't seen any of those, and I'd have to look it up specifically what they are. But what we see on our district, and I meant to put it in the slides, but a ewe-neck, and it's like really high withers. It looks very strange. We always thought that was inbreeding, and probably a little bit of it is, but it actually dated back to a super old Spanish bloodline that they did have necks like that. So it kind of went hand in hand, like it is old Spanish, but we don't really want that in in our riding horses. So
Sure. So the next question is, in herd management practice, is it preferred to preserve the older bloodline's purity or to preserve the herd viability by introducing horses from other areas, domestic horses, etc.?
I guess we're just starting to look at that, and more me than people who've been here longer than me. Just 3 years ago when I got here, we wanted to preserve the original horses that were here, but they're really not anymore. Because domestic ones have been turned out, and it's been decades of that happening. So personally, I feel like for the horse being healthy, we should probably make the bloodlines as diverse as possible.
Sorry, I struggled to find my mute button. The next question is, since animals are not permitted to be moved, has artificial insemination been considered?
No, and I just found out that that Washington said we could move them if it's for genetic diversity. It has happened in the past, but it wasn't supposed to. So I think that's the route we would go, is trading with BLM or something like that.
Excellent. The next question, can you explain the horse's role in ecosystems?
So technically they're here and they've been here, but that's kind of a controversial topic because they tend to overgraze the land, but they're here and they're here to stay. So I think just keeping them minimal is the key. I mean, if you went out on our district, it would look like dirt and sagebrush. Sometimes I don't know what they're eating, and they have to share with the deer and the elk. So I think and they're allowed to be hunted and horses aren't, so their population just keeps growing. And we have mountain lions, but we don't have any other predators, and the mountain lions don't really go for the horses either. So yeah, I think just keeping them at the low number would be best for the ecosystem.
I believe this is a follow-up to this question. Can grazing rotation be done?
That would work, but I think so we border private lands, and they get onto the private lands if the fences aren't very good, and the ranchers will push them off onto the district, but they just come right back. Even with the cattle grazing, they're supposed to go in their little areas, and the ranchers move them every so many months, but they move and they don't stay in the area they're supposed to either. Like we'll set up horse traps, and the cattle guys will say, okay, put them in this area, there's no cows, and 2 days later the cows are in our trap. We're like, hey, but they're animals, so that's what they're gonna do.
All right, I think we have time for one last question, and that is PZP the best way to control breeding?
I kind of like the idea, this is just me personally, but I like the idea of some fertility control along with adoptions, because I feel like there's a lot of the American public that still wants a wild horse. But there's better fertility control now, which I did a bunch of research on. And the one I came up with that I liked the best was Gonacon, because it was a single shot, and PZP requires a booster, and Gonacon lasts for 3 years, maybe even 4. So that's kind of a no-brainer. It's a lot easier. But Assateague Island has been doing it since the 80s, so they're all, you can like walk among the horses, and they only need boosters, so that particular herd they have under control nicely.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think I'll throw it back to Danielle.
Excellent. I think you have quite an interested audience with all those questions. All right, next we are going to move on to Lindsey Blanchette. Lindsey comes to us from Florida, and she is a head surgical tech at a small animal clinic, but also keeps herself busy with an eventing barn. She co-owns an eventing barn. And both worlds that she revolves through, she has to deal with teams of people and leading teams of people. So I believe that is where Lindsey developed the idea for her topic that she's going to present on today. And I will say she took on something that was pretty brave. She took on a topic that is not really well documented or researched or supported in the equestrian world yet. She did have to kind of convert a lot of her research from the business world over to the equestrian world. And so it was an interesting type of project, and she also put a lot of great work into it. So I will now hand it over to Lindsey.
Thank you so much. Like she said, my name is Lindsey Blanchette, and the idea for this project started long before this class. Having spent my entire life in the industry in one way or the other, I've witnessed the changes in the dynamics from the day-to-day workings. But one thing that hasn't ever changed is our reliance on the dedication of the people within our industry to keep progress moving forward. In recent years, I've seen dozens and dozens of ads desperately looking for barn help and working students and volunteers and so many other roles in the industry. So it's clear that there's a need, but we suddenly have found ourselves with a very limited pool of applicants. The truth is that we kind of need to take a long, hard look at ourselves and decide if we're doing enough to solve this problem. We all know that outrageous salaries and benefits are off the table for most of us in this industry. So we have to think of an alternative means to compensate the individuals who we do have in order to keep the industry alive. I think the first step is to take a look at our programs, our barns, our businesses, and the other horsey endeavors, and ensure that we're doing the utmost for our existing teams. And when you start a new venture like this, you always have to worry about how it's going to be received by others. We horse people tend to be pretty set in our ways and can sometimes be pretty averse to change if there's not a guaranteed result. When I launched a survey, and when I asked about the general feelings, some were very honest in that they had no intentions to change what they were doing, and in a way that's okay. But from most, there was an overwhelmingly positive reception to the idea of improvement. Many people made suggestions about specific areas that they thought we could improve with leadership and team skills, from focusing to pony club etiquette to more certifications for instructors. But most felt the best first step was to change how we treat those who we work with and who work for us. So that's where I decided to start. This presentation is meant to help analyze teams and explore ways that we can make it better. In it, we'll look at who, what, why, how, and when of team building and leadership in the industry. I'll share some feedback from across the industry and provide some examples of small changes that we can implement to take our teams to the next level. So thank you and enjoy.
What is your
what drives you? It's the center that the universe revolves around. If you're here today, the answer probably has 4 hooves and a tail. Horses are a lifestyle, one we eat, drink, sleep, and dream about. One we care about so deeply that it sometimes becomes overwhelming when we really stop to think about it. But if we're lucky, we find ourselves surrounded by amazing people who make even the heaviest of loads feel lighter. An African proverb once read, "It takes a village to raise a child." In all of my years in this industry, I found that that saying can also be applied here. For every horse that steps foot into a ring, onto a track, leaves a start box, or comes back sound from a catastrophic injury, there's a team of people that help to get them there. A team is defined as a group of people who perform interdependent tasks to work towards accomplishing a common mission or objective. These teams are the backbone of the industry, and most goals we set as individuals would be impossible to reach without them. But who are these mysterious teams? The right answer to that question largely depends on who you ask, and, truth be told, there's no right answer. Your team could be the working students or the employees who keep your barn running smoothly and your horses happy. It could be your fellow volunteers who help make running a competition in any discipline possible, or your groom who keeps your horse looking like $1,000,000, or even your trainer who helps you reach your goals. The clients and the students who help you to reach new heights, or the parents, owners, sponsors, or any other of the countless faces in your cheering section. The ones that celebrate your success, share your tragedy, and drop everything to help you clean the cobwebs off your new-to-you barn. Everyone's team looks a little different, and the key to maintaining those teams is all in how you treat them. Everyone in this industry should understand the principles of teamwork. After all, the one thing we all have in common is that we want to work together with horses in one way or another. But that we lose sight of the bigger picture, and we sometimes forget that teamwork extends much further than the horse and the human. One would think that a group of people who are in the pursuit of such similar dreams would find it easy to work together towards a common goal. We all know that we need each other to keep the dream alive, because no one can do this alone. But that begs the question, why are these invaluable assets to our success so hard to find? Why is there such a high rate of burnout among those very people that we rely on to keep the industry moving forward? What happens to all the barn rats of the old days? While the answer to those questions may elude some, many of us have been around the industry long enough to pick out at least a few areas that contribute. And if you're here listening today, it probably means that you want to be a part of the solution, or you're at least willing to listen. In an effort to get feedback from individuals from across the industry about the best areas to focus our efforts, I launched an anonymous survey. In this survey, I asked 10 questions, all relating to each individual's positive and negative experiences working as a member of a team in the industry. As expected, the answers were as diverse as the disciplines and the teams that make them up, but there was also quite a lot of overlap. So here are the top 4 answers that were given by our survey takers. Number 1 was communication. A key to every successful team endeavor, and arguably the best way to show a good competitor, client, student, or human being is communicate effectively. Good communication makes teams efficient. It keeps each member on the same page and is one of the #1 ways to show respect to someone. On the flip side, poor communication leads to dysfunction, frustration, mistakes, and is listed as one of the main reasons why individuals will quit a job or leave a barn. Number 2 was listening. Communication is a two-way street. The first step is to write that message or say those words, but the next step is to listen for the response. You will find that some of the best ideas come from the place you least expect it. Even the idea that you were open and receptive to ideas and feedback is invaluable to many prospective team members. People love nothing more than to feel like they can voice their opinions and be heard, even if they never plan to say a word. Number 3, respect. Aretha Franklin wrote a song in 1967 about a 7-letter word, respect. Even just a little bit goes a long way. Between Aretha's words and the golden rule, we think we'd have this concept down a bit better. As we discovered earlier, communication is one way that we can show respect to those we work alongside. Respected team members go the extra mile to fulfill their responsibilities. Respected team members respect each other. And respected team members learn to respect themselves. We as an industry need to build each other up and encourage those around us to advocate for themselves.
By simply treating others with respect yourself, you can change their view of themselves and help them, give them the tools to secure better opportunities in the future. And number 4, opportunities for growth. Let's face it, no one likes to feel stuck. When we enter a situation, especially if it's at an introductory level, we expect there to be time where we learn and grow enough to move up. If you find yourself in a situation where you start to feel as though you'll never get anywhere, you start to lose interest in trying to do the best because, after all, it hasn't gotten you anywhere to try that hard. So sometimes doing something as small as taking suggestions for new ideas or allowing someone to try something new can inspire them with a new goal to work towards. Many of you probably already implement these items into your teams and programs. For those of you that do, keep it. Those of you who don't may be wondering why you should even bother. So let's break down the advantages. 1, invested team members perform better. In my experience, those who love their job, their team, and are happy in the environment will, without a doubt, work 10 times harder than those who don't. There are pros and cons to every job out there, but there has to be a proper balance. People who feel respected turn their respect back on the job, so make sure your workload is fair for the compensation, and make your barn a positive place for your team. 2, better horse care. The horses have and always will be the center of this industry, and we all know that the secret to happy horses is good care. The better your team, the better the care. Some of the best teammates that I've had have had the least experience and knowledge, but they are eager to learn and they want to do everything possible to make to the best of their ability. Happy and healthy horses lead to happy horse owners, and those owners lead to the money that's necessary to fuel your dreams. 3, communication equals better work quality. This one should be fairly evident. If your team members don't know what they're supposed to do, they can't do it. And the more information that they have, the better they can do their job. So the bottom line is make sure everybody on your team is on the same page of what they're doing, what is expected of them, and what the end result will be. And number 4, opportunity for growth equals longevity. We all know what a hassle it is to be in a constant state of training. It takes up a lot of valuable time that could be better served elsewhere. So, the solution is to allow the existing members of your team room to grow. If you know a team member has a specific area of interest, help them expand on that and allow their passion for it to drive them to do it better than even you could. Those opportunities are seldom forgotten, and knowing that you took a chance on them can often keep those individuals around for the long haul. So you're probably wondering how you implement some of the things that we've talked about so far. If you've never done it, it may seem like a big task, but I'm here to give you some solutions on how we do it here at my farm. We've talked about the importance of communicating with your team, but finding the right way to do that isn't always as simple as you'd think. Sometimes there are generational gaps amongst the members that can make finding one line of communication for a group difficult. In those cases, you might have to get creative or find multiple avenues to keep your team informed. For my barn, we have 2 active group messages, one for the working student team and one for the barn at large that includes the boarders and other clients as well. This allows for discussion to take place amongst the members, and then everyone gets the same information at the same time and in the same way. In some cases, these group messages also act as a downline where the team can bond over endless stories about broken halters and which horse swam in the trough that day. Once you have your method of communication, use it to get to know your team. Part of having a functional team involves knowing the strengths, weaknesses, likes, and dislikes of the people who make it up. This doesn't mean that you need to have them recite their life story, but you should know them well enough to put them in a role that complements their abilities. And knowing their favorite form of caffeine also can't hurt. My team and I recently moved our program to a much larger farm. It was a big step, and we all knew it was going to be a much more involved endeavor than the previous farm had been. So, as a group, we sat down and made a list of the extra chores that would need to be done on a weekly basis, and we each took one that we felt we could accomplish with our various schedules. And so far, it's worked beautifully. Everyone felt included in the decision, and it was a great way to make sure that the extra work was distributed evenly. But it doesn't always work out that seamlessly. Part of knowing your team is being able to piece together different personality types. Everyone is different, and opposites don't always attract. So, take the time to know your team. Do you have people who find solace in mucking out stalls or cleaning buckets? Or maybe someone who loves the detail that goes into doling out. They exist, and they might just be part of your team. So, now that we have your team talking, and you know a bit more about them, let's talk about time. Your time, your team's time, the number of hours in the day. Every person in this industry has been asked at least once if they ever leave the barn. The truth is, sometimes we only leave when we have to. But it is important for both you and your teammates to have a work-life balance to maintain everyone's sanity and prevent the looming burnout that seems to plague our industry. Most barns, shows, program, and people have at least a rough schedule, but we're going to take it just a little bit further. Scheduling clearly and scheduling fairly. These three things will help make everyone's life easy, and here's why. Scheduling early allows for any conflicts to be resolved, and people have doctor's appointments too. Scheduling clearly ensures that everyone knows when and what their jobs are. Even if the horses would love to get breakfast twice, they definitely don't need it. Scheduling fairly maintains the balance and ensures that one person doesn't feel as though they are taking on more than they should be. And if they do take on more responsibility or hours, they should understand that and agree to it beforehand. This leads me to my final point, delegation. It's an essential part of leading a team since, even if we think we can, we simply cannot do everything ourselves. But, like everything else, there's a balance. As a team leader, it can become easy to slowly do less and less as your team gets stronger. As a rule, I will not assign a task to one of my team that I do not or will not do myself. In fact, even though we own the farm, my business partner and I are usually the ones who take the weekend shifts so the rest of the team can have some time off, since they cover weekdays while we do our day jobs. This has been the best way that I've found to maintain a connection with the team. It allows me to relate to the struggles and concerns that they have about what they deal with each day at the farm. And I've found that it makes me more equipped to find a solution to those problems because I've dealt with them firsthand. And when you work with horses, no one's too good to know how to properly muck out a stall. The bottom line is that we all experience and goals. But our mutual love for the horses is a foundation that we can grow better teams and even a stronger industry from. I won't tell you it will be easy, but things that are worth it rarely are. If we take the time to change even one small thing that keeps hope alive for one equestrian, it's all worth it. We as an industry have the ability to give so much to one another, to build each other up and open doors that we never thought would be possible. Taking on that one working student or groom and putting in the time to teach them can change their lives and give them access to a marketable trade, housing, horses, and a confidence that can take them anywhere they want to go. Thanking that volunteer as you walk out of the arena can encourage them to come to the next show so that we competitors can continue to do what we love. And being the best teammate or leader you can be is guaranteed to take you to the next level. So I challenge each and every one of you today to take one thing and implement it into your programs, teams, barns, or in your own lives. That one simple thing can be the first step to a better future for everyone involved. And we may even find that one day all of those barn rats might just be scurrying around the aisles once more. All right. Now that I have to figure out how to get back. There we go.
So Lindsey, I hope you have the chat box open. There are so many compliments in there. There aren't any questions, but it's just comment over comment over comment, just how amazing this video is. Are there any questions for Lindsey? We still have a few minutes left, so we do have time for Q&A. And I encourage all of our students, Brooke, Megan, and Lindsey, to open the comments. I'll save them and send it to you, but there's just so much amazing feedback there that I hope you go and review. We do have a hand up. Lucia, are you able to unmute? Okay, great.
I am. Thank you. I just want to say thank you. I'm Lucia Dressel. I'm the Director of General Education, but in a past life, I taught for 10 years in an agricultural school. So I want to thank you, Lindsey, and I want to thank the other presenters too, because, you know, I also am an English teacher. So the presentations were on point, and the way you crafted them was beautiful. I used to actually do FFA judging, so I'm very familiar with the, you know, with the needs of what you have to present and how you have to present it, and just wonderful job. I'm so impressed by the subjects and by how you guys put this together, and the sentiment too of your presentation with the volunteers. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give it another minute just to see if, oh, we do have a question. Great. Have you considered continued education for staff, perhaps for performance evaluations?
I have, and I do end up meeting with a lot of my working students and team members periodically to say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? These are the areas where I would, you know, I'd like to see you do a little bit more. Here are the, but I try to highlight the areas that they are doing well as well, because it can be, as someone who's had the kind of reviews where you just seem to get a lot of criticism, it can be a little demeaning, and it doesn't make you really inspired to do and work harder. So I try to start it out with, hey, you're doing these things great. I'd like to see you improve a little bit more here. Let's see, what can we do to help you do that?
Excellent. The next question is, how do you balance work and life?
The biggest thing is horses are my sanity. So the fact that I spend 99% of my life in the barn is definitely helpful in that. I am a newly promoted manager at the clinic that I work for as well. So my work-life balance is shifting a little bit. But my compromise was, if I'm going to take on more hours, we have to have a balance where I can still go to the barn, and I can still sleep, and I can still cook, and I can still do all the things that I need to do outside of work that make, you know, that maintain my sanity. So I'm very, very protective of my time and how I get to spend it. And thankfully, the job that I work for is very, very understanding of that. So I do what I can to be at the barn as much as I can. But when I'm at work, I'm at work, and I dedicate those hours to being at work. And they've been pretty great about it.
Great. Sorry, also I had trouble finding the mute button. Are there any last questions for Lindsey? I do see one more here, but just in case there's any others. Have you changed any of your own practices after completing this project rather, or have you come up with new inspiring ideas to manage your teams?
I think it's always about growing and expanding what you're doing already. I'm very grateful that my business partner and I share the same philosophy with the way that we manage our team. And there are definitely things that I have in my research with what the business industry does that I'm looking to add to what we do. I do want to have a little bit more hard, fast meetings and things like that. I think it's a good thing to get everybody together in one place. The group chats and the electronic communications are great, but there's nothing better than seeing and being able to decipher body language and stuff like that from the other people. So that's something that I want to really try. COVID's been a little weird because everybody works in different departments that require certain amounts of human interaction or limits human interaction. But for the most part, now that we all kind of been vaccinated, that's going to help a little bit too. And then I want to start meeting with some of the boarders and clients and stuff to get some feedback from them. We did just go through a very large transition from our 5-stall barn to a 20-stall barn. So now having about 20 horses under our daily care it's been a big shift. So we're kind of all running around to try to figure everything out. But I want to bring everybody back and kind of balance everybody out again and see if there's anything else we can improve on.
Wonderful. I think our last question here is, how do you communicate effectively with staff when you need to reprimand them or want them to do something different?
I've found that in person is the best way to do it. Written messages are more convenient a lot of the time, but I sometimes feel like the meaning behind it and some of the emotion behind it can be misconstrued. Everybody interprets things a little bit differently, and if you're face to face, it's a little harder to take something the wrong way. And so I usually will have some kind of in-barn meeting. Hey, can you meet me at XYZ time? Or hey, can we, meet up for coffee or something like that? Just a couple of things that I want to go over with. And I tried really hard to get their side of it before I issue any kind of reprimand, because there are two sides to every story. And just because one person, I've had enough examples of just because one person sees you do something one way doesn't mean that that's just not been a really bad day and you weren't extra careful picking out the stalls that day or something. So I try not to crawl all over them from the get-go. It's very much a conversation, and I want to hear their parts of it as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsey, for your presentation. If Abby's ready, I'll kick it back to her for closing remarks.
I am indeed ready, Steph. Thank you so much. Oh, I have my video off for a second. Hang on. There we go. Now I'm back. So, yeah, I have to say this has been fantastic. I'm really, really glad to have had our first online students as a part of this event. It's been great. I'm really excited. You guys are members of the first graduating class of the online equine program. And that is nothing to shake a stick at. You guys were courageous in deciding to join this program and enter into something that that you had no way of knowing what to expect, and you stuck with it, and you've done exemplary work, and I'm so proud. Thanks everyone who has participated tonight, for your attention and your time. We have made a recording of this webinar, and we will be sending around a link to it, including also links to the projects themselves. And so we hope that you have enjoyed the work that our students have prepared for you, and I wish you all a safe and pleasant evening.